And good evening, everybody. Those who are joining us online via Zoom and on IG, and those who have made the time to join us in person over here. I'd like to welcome you all to this evening's reading. This is one of the series of readings that we have every month with the Grief Institute, and I'm really very happy that tonight we are featuring once again Elizabeth-Irene Baitie. And I say once again because when we started this reading series many years ago, Elizabeth-Irene was one of the authors with whom we started. I'm very glad to welcome you to join me on stage tonight.
Thank you, Martin. It's a delight to be here.
Yes. And so I will just give a very quick introduction of who Elizabeth-Irene Baitie is. Professionally, she's a clinical biochemist. She's director of Patholab Solutions Medical Laboratory, Ghana. And this was founded 25 years ago. She is a multiple award winning author. She has 8 books to her credit. And it does seem that the most recent ones are quite big. I'm going to ask her about that compared to the early ones. Her novels have been published across 3 continents and they've claimed several awards, including the Macmillan Writers' Prize for Africa, the Bird Award for African Young Adult Literature, and the Children's Africana Book Award. Tonight, we are going to be talking about the book Crossing the Stream. But this is not the latest book from Elizabeth-Irene Baitie. The honor of that goes to the book Flying Up the Mountain, and that was released this year in the US. I think that we are waiting for a Ghanaian release
We are.
later this year. So, what we are going to do is we'll talk about Elizabeth-Irene, we'll talk about the book, and we'll also take readings from the book as well. You can send in comments or questions at any point. We'll take them from Zoom, from Instagram. We are live also on YouTube, so if people send questions in there, we are going to pick them. And finally, we can take questions also from the audience here at any time. So you can just raise your hand or send us a message. We'll read it. Okay, so let me first begin with a question about work. I always find it funny when people ask, how do you combine writing with whatever else that a person is doing? Because that is now very common. I barely meet somebody who is totally dedicated to writing, but I have to ask it. How do you manage the time as a clinical biochemist working in the lab and writing as well?
The answer, Martin, is with great difficulty. It doesn't get easier. It's just trying to maintain regularity and trying to maintain a consistent pattern. I work at the lab during the day and I write at night in the evening. My husband, who is here with me, knows the usual routine. Come home, have a little conversation with my husband, go for my walk, evening walk, and then come back and try and do some writing. I manage it most times, but not all the time.
But does the regularity help? Does it help that you have a schedule?
The regularity is key. Without that, I do slip out of routine sometimes, and that is always quite detrimental to the writing because coming back in, it's like any other habit. After you've done it a few times, then your body needs to do it for you to feel balanced. But once, for whatever reason, I have fallen out of routine, coming back is always a lot harder. And then I fail to achieve my goals and so forth. So the regularity is actually more important than the output at each setting. When I sit down to write in the evening, it doesn't matter whether I'm able to accomplish a chapter or a page. The most important thing is I was able to get myself one sentence ahead than I was the day before.
Around about how many minutes do you spend maybe a day? I mean,
it varies widely. It varies widely. Yesterday, I don't think I was able to do because I actually felt quite unwell yesterday. But on average, perhaps an hour. On average, on a good night, perhaps 2 hours. But on average, about an hour. I would like it to be more.
Oh, really? So for those writers who unfortunately find themselves not being very prolific, I guess that's what works.
Yes, the regularity.
Regularity,
Yes.
and probably maybe an hour a day. I did mention also that when we started this reading series at Griffey, you were one of the early early writers that we invited. Um, but looking back, I mean, it's been a long time. I mean, those were the, I think that was when you had just won the BET Award for African Writing. And we had a reading with you down in the foyer. I mean, looking back, I mean, how would you describe the journey from those days to now, where I would say that you've broken into the big league, more or less, being published by Norton?
It's a feeling of overwhelming gratitude. Um, because this is what I have always wanted from when I was a child. Is what about, and frankly, I would have liked to have had more books to my name by now. I really figured that by this age, I'd have had probably about 30 titles. So for me now, working on my ninth book, I keep thinking, look, I need to keep moving. So the feeling I have now is I need to move faster, but it's coupled with a lot of gratitude and a lot of gratitude to the writers family that I find myself in, the family that I have with you, Writers Project Ghana and so forth, because that is a circle within which you can only grow, you can make connections, you can expand. And it's something that I'd encourage any writer out there to do, to find a writing community, even if you're not able to um, engage in it as regularly as one would like to. Just keep connected, see what people are doing, just keep in the space. It helps to stimulate you and provides opportunities to grow. So it's a feeling of gratitude, Martin.
Yes, and it's also interesting that you are talking about working on my ninth book. I was thinking that it's time to take a step back and relax. I mean, after having two books out there in the big league, you say, all right, let me just take
No, no,
a
no, no,
step
no.
back.
It's more speed now.
Right. So crossing the stream, and I have to say that the cover I have, the edition I have is different from yours. I don't know which is better, mine or yours. Which is my edition?
That's the US edition. This is
Right,
the Ghana edition.
right.
There's the UK edition, which I should have brought actually, and then there's also the Italian edition, and there's one in Portugal,
I see.
and then Nigeria.
Okay.
So yes, it has spread out into a number of countries, for which
Wow.
I'm also grateful.
I see. And so for those who are here, the copies that are available for sale are that edition, Crossing the Stream. But the story is the same. Well, I hope is it.
It is the same.
I think that there's sometimes I think that it would only be in very extreme cases where a person would make changes to an edition to fit a certain market. I do know that some books have suffered that, but it's not something that I guess would afflict
No,
your
no.
books.
Save a few. The story is exactly the same. Just a few things. For example, we would say the car park, and the Americans change that to the parking lot.
Right.
And you'd say trousers, and they change that to pants. So it's just a few tiny changes.
Nothing harmful.
No.
Okay, so now we have Crossing the Stream. I have to say that when I really got into it, the first thing that struck me was that this was something like the Hardy Boys books that I used to read, in terms of the mystery, and pitched at the level of teenagers, the mystery, the suspense. And I was thinking, wow, if I had these kind of books when I was young, how would they compare with the Hardy Boys, the Nancy Drew, etc. that I used to read? Now, before we're going to talk a little bit more about the book itself, would those type of books have influenced your writing or the way you see young adult fiction at all?
Oh, absolutely. I was an avid reader when I was the age of my characters. And I read those ones, the Enid Blytons and then Nancy Drews and Hardy Boys and just about anything I could lay my grubby paws on back then. And that does largely influence the idea you have of a good story. The stories that I enjoyed reading when I was younger are to a large extent the kind of stories that I would tell now, set in Ghana, Ghanaian children. Yes, there's definitely an influence from what I read.
Yes, there's a lot of suspense in there. I mean, from the beginning, one wouldn't expect that you would be letting people hang on tight ropes. I mean, it didn't start off like that kind of book at all. But by the time you get to this is what you call what a page turner, right? You're looking
I'm
for what
glad to
will
hear
happen
that.
next. All right, let's first listen to something from the book. I've written down a bunch of questions that I want to ask you, but for us, I would like to hear something from the book. Crossing the stream.
So I'll start right from the very beginning. My main character's name is Ato. Ato is 12 years old. Ato stared at the print on the school bulletin board. His breathing stopped. Noma spreads its wings in welcome to Asafo, he read. Earth warriors, are you old enough to leave home on your own, but young enough to believe that the earth needs you? Do you have a project to protect the green earth, the blue sky, and the animals and people between the two? Show us. Then let us ferry you away from the crowded city to the mountainous bird island of Noma. Your project is your invitation, Atu read. Submit it to us by June 1st. That was 12 weeks from now. Noma was open at last. A vision of the island flooded Ato's mind. Rock-studded mountainsides and leafy lower hills. He had sailed over the choppy grey waters that surrounded the bird island 1,000 times in his dreams. He had landed on his famous eastern peak, the Dawn Locust, where the first rays of sunrise struck in an explosion of red and orange light. Here, thousands of bird species lived protected, including his favorite bird, the peregrine falcon. Move! How long does it take you to read that? We all want to have a look. Atu had seen all he needed to. Beside him, Jifa elbowed out a path for them through the mass of sweaty school kids surging towards the bulletin board. Atu, we've got to get in. Her small heart-shaped face was alight with excitement. Yes, they did, Atu thought, heart pounding, as they walked down the school corridor to join another friend, Leslie. Leslie pointed to Atu's hands. That's because Noma's open? He asked in surprise. Atu looked down. His hands were trembling. He clenched them into fists, and flanked by his two oldest friends, he walked toward the parking lot. The last time Noma had opened was when he was 7 years old. It had been 5 years of dreaming since then. 5 years dreaming about visiting the famous bird wonderland that his father had helped to build. His father had written him one letter. Its words had played on repeat in his head since he had learned to read. My son, it's been months of hard work, but now the dream is forming before my eyes. I am sitting at the highest point of Noma. It's called the Dawn Locust. One day, I hope you will sit here with me. Ato, now that the Noma dream is here, it must stay alive. Those of us who believe in it must protect it. For now, the sun shines, but enemy storms are gathering. One day, they may be unleashed. If they are, I have a plan. It is protected somewhere below this rock peak where the sunlight first greets Noma, where the falcons watch over the valley. With enough Asafo, we can protect this dream. Whenever I hold you in my arms, I can see you are truly like me, Asafo, a protector of our world. When your steps are strong enough to match mine, we shall walk this mountainside together to protect this dream. Only a few people are privileged enough to step on Noma. You will be one of them. You will prove yourself good enough to come here. Atu halted in the middle of the open school corridor. We need to start our project now. Leslie stuck out his lip doubtfully. Do you know people can get diseases and parasites from infected birds? No negative vibes. Jifa shoved back her spectacles and gave Leslie a warning look. Being in the same school was the only thing his two friends had in common. Good thing Jifa had stopped biting kids the way she used to back in kindergarten, Atu thought, or she would have eaten Leslie alive by now. Even at 12 years old, she still looked as if she wanted to deal with problems kindergarten style. Why is Noma such a big deal? Do we really want to hang out with a bunch of birds with fleas and viruses? Leslie's shoulders sagged with a lack of enthusiasm. Trust Leslie, Atu thought, always figuring out how something could not be done. Maybe because it's the biggest bird sanctuary in all of Africa, Leslie, he said. Maybe because nobody knows when it's going to open. And when it does open, only a few people get to visit at a time because birds need protection from humans. And maybe he thought, because my father needs to know he was right about me, I am good enough to go there.
Oh, thank you. So that is the opening. The first question I'll ask about this reading and also the book in general is birds. I mean, the bird park, if I the Noma, it plays such a central role. In fact, even birds, if and I must say that I was surprised at the level of savagery that you introduced through the birds. But can you tell me why birds? Why is this natural sanctuary about birds? Is there any significance for you? Where does the idea come from?
Well, I think birds in general, coming from this, I've always loved natural settings, and I think birds are a key indicator of what is going on in the environment. Because when we have a situation where the birds are vanishing and bird species are vanishing, then we know that something is out of sync. So I had always known that there was going to be a strong ecological slant here, and therefore, for me, birds were the image that I wanted to use to represent the natural world. But also, birds have always played a role in my mind, a symbolic role in my mind, because when I was younger in primary school, we were divided into teams for sports and so forth. And the team I was in was the Red Eagles. And that really plays a strong, it brings up a strong picture in your mind when you're a child. You imagine yourself, powerful and majestic like the eagle. I think it's a great thing that when schools do that, really. We also had the yellow bees. I don't know who the bees were, but I suppose when you want to study bees themselves, they themselves have got, their own powerful symbolism and imagery. But yes, that's where it grew from. And I find that to a large extent in life, I'm always interested in the relationship between birds and the sort of what they symbolize and how that reflects on us as human beings. The birds that are strong and dynamic, and the birds that are perhaps humbler but also have their place. So all of those are at the back of my mind when I was writing the story, just how to portray the birds in relation to human beings, how we could use them as symbols to represent certain aspects of human character, courage, fear, and so all of these you can see reflected in birds as well.
I find that getting to the end, I mean, when the action was really very strong and the prophet was on his last legs, more or less, you had a very clever play where we have Ato. You are talking about Ato, but you are describing a falcon.
Yes.
And I found that very, very well done.
Thank you.
I enjoyed that immensely. But there's a character in here. In fact, let me first talk about Leslie, because Leslie is the one who is so frightened of James that, I mean, it creates a whole scene when he visits the sanctuary, the Agor, I mean, the children's sanctuary. But so much that I began to wonder. I mean, this must have something to do with you and your lab, isn't it? Because all these all these gems and his pathological fear of them, we come from someone who knows about gems.
Well, I run a testing laboratory, so perhaps unconsciously that may have featured, yes. But Leslie is the three children are so starkly different in character, and what I'm hoping that my reader will pick up from here is this the beauty and diversity, because you have some characters who are outspoken, and we have that in our friendships as well. You have that friend who will tell anybody anything, and you have the other one who's very cautious. It's okay, don't say anything. And each has got their place, and I feel that for me, I would like to say that as I have evolved, I have come to appreciate what each person brings to a relationship, no matter how different they are from us. So just highlighting the differences among the children. Um, I'm hoping that we can all see it stitched together, see how it all comes together, despite the fact that Leslie, oh yeah, some kind of person. Keep me out of it.
Now, there's this character in there. I mean, he plays a prominent role, and I think he's written in such a way that you can be a bit sympathetic to him. But for Ghanaian readers, I think it's almost a giveaway as soon as you hear the name. Prophet Yaka Yaka. I mean, maybe for someone who doesn't speak Cree or something, I mean, they might wonder. But as soon as I saw that name, I knew that well, this is someone who would be up to no good. Was that intentional? Did you choose that name with this in mind?
I did actually. I did. I know that he was quite colorfully depicted, but yes, I did. I did.
Yeah.
I actually didn't want to make any bones about it. I did in the beginning wonder, okay, should I probably um make it less obvious from the beginning, make him a lot more likable? I thought, no, we are going to do it this way.
Okay, so apart from his character, which you depict quite nicely, is a true charlatan. Is does it in any way reflect the way you see um the prophetic mood? I mean, those the preachers who present as prophets. I mean,
Oh,
personally,
Martin.
is that how you see them? How you depict it in the
And
book?
unfortunately, I wouldn't want to tar everybody with the same brush or feather everybody with the same brush. I wouldn't want to do that. But we've seen enough and heard enough in this country to know that there are at least some who are up to no good. There are many who do a great job, many who guide their flocks with the goodwill of their flocks at heart, actively and genuinely seeking and serving the interests of the people that they are leading. There are many like that, but there are some who are not like that.
Yeah, and what we are talking about is a really very devious character in this book. Goes by the name of Prophet Yaka Yaka, who is about fiery stuff. But that's not the only very colorful character in I want to ask you about. There is Nana, the Ato's grandmother. Now, I feel that she was. I mean, there's lots of spiritual stuff in the book, but I read her more as a kind of a guiding spirit. And in fact, if you had written the story without making her a person, I think it might even still have worked because of the role she played was more like guiding Ato throughout what I would say is a rather difficult period of his life. If you could tell me a little bit again about the character of Nana.
Nana was birthed from my experience with my own grandmother. And it's interesting to hear you say that even if she had not been alive, she could have been portrayed because my grandmother died 14 years ago, and I wrote this book 3 years ago. So yes, to a certain extent, I probably had just felt that guiding influence. Now, when I was younger, to me, my grandmother was a fire-breathing dragon. She was so scary. I had just one grandparent. A lot of my friends had four grandparents. I had just one. That one grandparent was like four grandparents rolled in one. She was a very strong woman, and I was terrified of her. We lived with her when I was younger. She had a flat. She had a building with two flats, a lower flat and an upper flat. And I lived with my parents and my siblings in the upper flats for a while, and she lived in the lower flat of her own home until we moved out when my parents' own home was ready. And as I said, I was so scared of her. But our relationship deepened and sweetened as the years went by. And by the time I was a young adult, probably about 19, 20 onwards, I loved my grandmother from the bottom of my heart. She was so strong, so encouraging, and I spent a lot of time with her. I would go and see her, particularly when I had my own children. I would go and see her sit on. She had an armchair, a sofa. Yeah,
We're
so
going to
we
talk
see where.
about that armchair.
And I would sit across from her, and we shared stories about. She told me so much that helped me to square my shoulders about life, because there's so much in life that can be intimidating, that can be scary. But listening to her telling me how she navigated her own difficulties, it just sort of drove some steel into me, I believe, and also sympathy and empathy for other people. She had a very good heart, and despite the fact that she was quite a rough and ready sort of person, she sought other people's interest. But just the story she shared with me about her life, and the perspectives that she had to difficulties in life. And her perspectives were, look, just get up and keep going. Don't be afraid. That largely shaped the grandmother that I wrote in the story. And I often wondered what it would it have been like for me to have had that relationship with my grandmother when I was a child, because I had that sweet relationship with her when I was older. When I was a child, if I saw her coming here, I ran in the opposite direction. So I wanted to gift my character that grandmother who stands beside you with a kind of love that makes you feel as if nobody can touch me because she will protect me. It doesn't mean you can just go out and do anything you like, but you know that sometimes if you don't have backing, you are afraid to take a step. But if you know that there are arms that will carry you, it makes it braver for you to take a step into unknown territory. So that's what I wrote for my main character.
Yeah, and one thing which I liked was the fact that she was sympathetic enough to Ato's mother. To be able to say that, well, I mean, I can understand her because I used to be like her. And I really found that very interesting and thought provoking, because not many people give space for other people's mistakes. Even though we all make mistakes, a lot of people will pick out a mistake one person makes and really make a big case out of it. But that wasn't this character, and that again was a learning experience. So I mean, for young people reading this, I guess that is something that they can pick up readily.
Yes,
But
I must admit that this was not how she was first written. When she was first written, she had very little patience for Atu's mother. But you know that you keep editing the story, and as time went by, when I got to know the grandmother in the story better, because yes, she was birthed from my own grandmother, but this grandmother is going through her own experiences. Each time I rewrote the story, she changed a little bit. She evolved in the story.
I see. Well, I can't imagine what the earlier grandmother was, but I can say that I like this one very much.
I'm glad you do.
Let's take another reading from Crossing the Stream. And so, as I said, we will take your questions and comments if you have them. If you send them via Instagram or Zoom, Gladstone is going to pick them and send them to my phone. I'll read them. And if you have a question in the audience, please draw our attention and then we'll pass the mic over to you.
In my second reading, Ato is going to his grandmother's for the first time. His mother is driving him there. His mother is taking him to his grandmother's place against her will. And Ato is aware that his mother is suspicious of his grandmother, but it seems as if his mother has been pressed into taking him to spend the weekend with his grandmother. After about half an hour, they turned onto a wide, quiet street. There were no street hawkers here. Tamarind Ridge Vale, a large sign at the corner of the road announced. This was Nana's side of town. Ato stared. Wavy palm trees on either side of the road bowed to homes with sweeping balconies that made them look like castles. Left turn, right turn, another left turn. The houses were painted in soft blues and pinks and peaches, unlike in his community where every home was a dull white or fading yellow color. Mum's fingertips fluttered against her steering wheel like nervous rose petals. She slowed to a stop alongside a butter yellow wall with a riot of peach, white, and purple bougainvillea blossoms twisting along the top of it. He peeked through the diamond-shaped gaps in the stone wall. It was just as he remembered from a long time ago, a huge leafy garden. Nana's house sat in the middle like a sweet candy home on a green carpet surrounded by a magic wood. Back home, 4 big hops would take him from their front door to their wooden gate. They didn't have a lawn. Mom couldn't afford a gardener. His mother turned to him with her engine still running. Ato, her tone had shifted from cross to nervous. Listen to me. Don't sit on her porch sofa, please. And don't tell her I told you that. He stared at her. Promise me, she urged. Be careful of the porch sofa, the prophet had said. History repeats itself. He began, but the small blue side gate was already swinging open. Nana swirled out like a joyful yellow and green bird of paradise. She must have been waiting. Her skirt reminded him of old and new mango leaves. Ato! She hopped across the narrow concrete pavement and opened his car door. Her arms enveloped him when he stepped out. She was smiling, kissing his cheeks and forehead. His head had inched past her ear now, he realized. The familiar smell of shea butter and talcum powder wafted delicately to him. It was a smell he loved. I'm scared. Why had his mother said that so often to the prophet? And why did the prophet keep telling Mom to be careful of Nana? His mom switched off her engine and stepped out of the car. She brushed a twitching hand down her skirt and began to tell Nana about his homework and class tests and bedtime, but Nana had already slung his weekend bag over her square shoulder and was pulling him toward her gate. Mina. The smile faded from Nana's voice. There was something in her voice, almost sadness. Let's stick with our plan. And she whisked Atu through the gate. It clanged shut like a jail door. His mother was left outside by the open door of her car. Atu had heard the plan. Mom would bring him to Nana's on Friday after school. On Sunday after lunch, Nana would take him back home. He could do his homework at home. Nana's time with him was not for homework. Nana skipped ahead up the stairs to the wide rectangular porch of her home. He hung back beside the gate. Nana, Mom is still outside. She won't be there forever, Nana called back lightly. Stretch your legs in the garden and then come, see your room. She disappeared behind the screen door, taking his bag inside. He looked up at the porch. A lush green creeper dotted with lavender flowers wound through a wooden lattice that framed the space. And there it was, at the far end of the porch, the sofa. It was a lumpy 3-seater covered in scratchy-looking orange fabric. It had been patched in a few places and was stained in several more. It looked like it had been rescued from a sofa orphanage. What happened after a person sat on it? Did Mom and the prophet think it was bewitched? 2 cane chairs with green cushions were set opposite it. Hopefully it would be safe to sit on them. His mother hadn't moved. He would have heard her clattery engine above the evening conversations of people walking back from work on the street outside. Why had she brought him here if she was too scared to leave him? He turned to Nana's garden, which sprawled out to the right of the porch. Red hibiscuses grew along the creamy wall. Vegetables grew along the side of the house near the back wall. He recognized tomato, okra, peppers, lettuce, but the real magic rose ahead of him. He counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spreading trees. They grew way above the roof of the house. The trees silently beckoned him. He stepped along the paving stones that wound an S-shaped path to the garden. The leafy branches allowed the setting sun to speckle the ground with bronze light. He walked past, rubbing his palm on their rough trunks, a mango tree, an avocado. And then he saw it. Another couple of steps, and he would have trod on it. A green tarpaulin rectangle spread out on the ground underneath a neem tree. A pyramid of loose earth rose beside it. He leaned forward, lifted the edge of the tarpaulin, and felt his heart stop. A hole in the ground, deep and rectangular, freshly dug. It looked like a grave.
Okay, so thank you for that second read it. Because we when you study about writing, you can always tell that there are things that would appear in the early part of a story and they don't appear for nothing. It definitely means something is going to happen about them later in the story. And there's this, it was in fact a grief, but I'm not going to give it away unless you read something about it later. It's a very unexpected sort of grief. And this book, as I mentioned, we have copies available on sale, and that's one of the reasons why I'm not giving everything away. What sort of a grief was it? And I also like the way you stopped there. This is what I was saying earlier, that the book is a page turner, because having told us that it was a grief, what sort of a grief and what happens to it. But let me go on and ask you about locations. You've described Nane's house, which obviously is like an upper middle class sort of house, very nice and all that. But just not too distant, we begin to see a slum across a stream, in fact. And I began to think, Accra, what places are like that? And I've written down, could it be Nima and Kanda? Could it be Asylum Down?
Your first guess is right.
So it actually
That's actually where I grew up.
I see.
Yes, my grandmother's house was in Nima, not too far from what is now the president's house, just down the road from there. But Nima wasn't far away either. And as children, when the adults are not around and we sneak out of the house, of course, you want to go to Nima was a more exciting place for us. It was a gutter with all sorts of things in the gutter. It was actually, we used to call it the Forbidden Stream when we were younger.
So actually, a lot of what is in here came from.
Yes.
I see. From
That setting came from the pictures I had of my own childhood growing up in my grandmother's house.
Which brings me to ask, is there more in this story that came from your childhood?
Nana, as you find out, is somebody who is very close to or very a strong believer in the healing power of the natural world. And my grandmother, she had this book beside her, God's Pharmacy and Health Through God's Garden. She was a strong believer in natural remedies, which is not to say she didn't take orthodox medicines as well. She did. But when we were younger, if we'll be tired if you walk past my grandmother sniffing or my stomach, oh, some herbs will be boiled up for you very quickly when you sit in front of her and drink them. So yes, that belief and the knowledge that there's a lot that is provided for us in nature that is of healing, but we often haven't discovered it. And the grandmother that I wrote in here was a grandmother who also understood the healing power of a lot of our plants in our environment.
Right. So now we know where this story is actually set. It's in in Nima. Beyond that, we have some of the other characters who you've written in the way that the young people interacted across the stream. We see already that you present class tensions very very starkly, but some of it doesn't seem very too well resolved. I mean, for example, BB and Yusuf, right? When I read Yusuf, I was thinking, it's like he was too stuck in the past with BB. He was still like a child, kind of, still carrying the water pistol. And so I was just wondering, with this the class difference, would somebody who is in the rough and tumble of Nima still behave in that sort of manner when you consider that?
As in, you felt maybe he was too soft.
Yes, I did. I felt he was too soft. I actually thought he was like a child in many ways, how he would talk to Ato, tell him about how he felt about Ato's father and all that. I didn't quite feel that the character was as hardened as one would anticipate.
I think what I was portraying in there was the significance and the impact that that friendship had on him. Because you can have some friendships even from childhood, which even if the friendship dies for whatever reason or the other person goes away, there may be some experiences you have that you carry in your heart with you for the rest of your life. And those experiences could often even inform the way that you interact with other people. I think there are some things in our past that never really go away, and they continue to influence us the rest of our lives, for good and sometimes not for good.
I find Atu a very interesting character. Very, very interesting. Because at the end of the day, he seems he's not a gentleman. Yes, he likes bloody things. And he tortured Philomena. I mean, that's how I put it. I wrote down Philomena's torture by Atu. Did you set out to make him like that? You were trying to craft a more gentle character because I mean, in the
I
end, he
think,
was very.
truthfully, my memory of childhood, we were. I remember we had a housekeeper who, when everybody left the house and she was looking after us, we would climb onto, there was an outhouse, we would climb onto the roof of the outhouse and dangle our feet over the edge of the roof, indicating to her that we would jump over. And this woman would drop to her knees and beg us, please get off the roof. We knew she couldn't climb the roof to catch us. Please get off the roof. And there were my siblings and I, there were four of us, and we had two cousins who regularly joined us. There were six of us. We have six kids together. You more or less form some sort of gang, and you do all sorts of things that you wouldn't normally have done if you were by yourself. So for me, Atu touching Philomena was it's the kind of thing that we would have done easily when we were children.
Well, I mean, at least the torture was for a good cause. Again, not to give too much away, but that was the only way Atu could extract some very very important information. Well, to nail the prophet. Yaka yaka yaka. Let's take one more reading for the book, and we are open for your questions. Okay, there's one question here. Let's take that.
Hello. Yeah.
Yes, please go ahead.
My question is this one is to Miss Elizabeth. Yeah. What inspired you to include a lot of suspense in your story? For example, first when I started reading the story, it was mainly on Ato. Then all of a sudden it started shifting to his grandmother and her past and stuff. So what inspired you to make this shift in story? Yeah.
Our lives are so closely intertwined with other people. So the main story is about Atu, but Atu is who he is and is able to do some of the things he does because of the people in his lives. So particularly when we are young, the people around us can make a difference in the decision, even when we are older, make a difference in the decisions that we make. And so for Atu to be able to navigate his way through some of his difficulties, if he hadn't had his grandmother, I think he may have been too scared to do some of the things that he did. And so his grandmother was in there as a salute to the older people in our lives who strengthen us, who make us realize that, you know, something, fear is a part of being a person, but we have to know what the fear is telling us. We have to be sure that we don't let the fear stop us from doing what we really need to do. Sometimes we need somebody to tell us that. We may not be able to process that on our own. And as far as the suspense, I'm glad to hear that you found it suspenseful. As a writer, I have to sort of pace the story out in a way that will make you want to turn the page to find out, okay, so what happened? So what happened? So what happened? So it was all quite intentional. Sometimes when I was writing the beginning, I found that I put in too much in the beginning. I need to take some of this out and take it, put in the middle or towards the end. So there's a lot of rearranging that I need to do to make sure that a reader like you will stay up at night to read it.
Good evening.
Hello.
My question is to you again, Miss Elizabeth. Why did you choose to write about a spiritual grandmother?
I think when you say spiritual, can you just explain a little bit more to me? What made you see her as spiritual?
Well, because the prophet Yaka said that grandmothers have very powerful spiritual spirits, and because she talked about a lot of spiritual stuff like the fear and yeah.
I think, grandmothers, they've been around for a long time, and they understand that a lot of the things that um, make us think a certain way or do certain things are because of things that we hear in our minds and things that our own spirits whisper to us. Sometimes when we are younger, we don't always fully understand that, but somebody who's been on the earth for a long time understands that. So this grandmother brings in that um she makes her to understand that there's a part of you that you can't see, but that part of you speaks to you. That part of you guides you. I'm sure you feel it sometimes, don't you? Sometimes you have your own voice in your head, don't you? Sometimes you hear something being whispered in your own heart, and sometimes you talk to yourself. It's like you're talking to two different people. So you are talking to you almost as if you are two people. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever felt that?
Yes.
Yes, but I think sometimes when we are younger, we are not so aware of the fact that we have a spirit inside us, and our own spirits or our own souls have conversations with us. So I think the grandmother was in a position to help Atu to understand that you're always going to hear, um, you're going to hear voices. You're going to hear um, a spiritual. You're going to have a spiritual relationship with a part of you that you cannot see, a part of you that you can hear but cannot see. So just becoming aware of that can help us to shape what we do and what we say. Does that help? Does it help?
Yes.
Okay.
I have another question.
Sure.
Why did you choose the main character, the names to be Ato, Zifa, and Lisa?
And Leslie.
Leslie.
Names. I must confess to you that names are pretty difficult for me. Atu was easy. I don't know why. I think because I had earlier written a short story, and the short story's name was the character's name was Atu, and that short story is still in my diary. It hasn't come out yet. So there was a boy called Atu who had a story that was waiting to be told. But with the others, it was just a lot of playing around until I found names that I also wanted names that didn't come from maybe a particular part of Ghana. I just wanted to spread things out a little bit. So I did think about that as well. And I even think about things like how do the names sound? Because I don't want the reader to get confused. You don't want to have three friends whose names all sound the same. Otherwise you might get confused. So just giving them distinct names. So you notice that one of them has got an A as a predominant vowel, another one is I as a predominant vowel, another one is E. It helps the reader process earlier and separate the characters earlier. So I think about all of those when I'm writing the characters.
Well, thank you very much. I'm really impressed that the young men asked these questions. Thank you. If we have further questions, we can take them. There's another one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. When you were talking about Philo, it reminds me of a quote where you said, the snakes have got it right. They know how to leave the old behind. And then that was quite fascinating. And I mean, if there is more to it, I'd like you to share with us. But the other thing is, when you were reading passages from the book, you sounded so good reading. And it came to mind that, do you have any of your books in an audio form? If you do, it will be interesting to hear. And if not, I think you're best fit to do your own audio books. That was beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll answer the second first. The books are not all of them, but this definitely is an audio format. I didn't narrate that, no. And I think there may be one more. I'm a little hazy on those details, but I haven't narrated that. But thank you very much. I will consider that in the future. And back to the snakes, yes. Snakes know when to leave the old behind because very often as human beings, we carry so much baggage. We carry baggage from the past which doesn't serve us any longer in the future. It was probably useful then, but each age and each stage brings with it fresh opportunities. And sometimes what served you at that time is no longer useful. Whatever beliefs you had, whatever knowledges or mindset, knowledge or mindset that you had at the time was okay for maybe when you were 10 years old, but when you're 20 years old, you need to have a different mindset and leave that behind and graciously say goodbye to it, knowing that it served you then, but that kind of thinking or that kind of practice or that kind of belief is no longer useful for now. That's more or less what I was hoping to share with my reader in that part.
Well, with the answer that you gave, I think that it's such, it's very, should I say, deep, and it's useful advice for people of any age. In fact, it's more useful for people who are older.
Yeah, because by then we've collected a lot of baggage, a lot to
Exactly.
leave behind.
And which brings me to what I wanted to ask. I really enjoyed this book, but I don't typically read young adult fiction. And obviously, from the questions, I find out that the young gentleman here also dug into it and really enjoyed it. Um, does it surprise you that you wrote this book for young adults and someone who has molted several times? I mean, I'm not particularly young any longer. Is still able to have such fun with the book.
I am glad the story was directed at young people, but it's very deeply gratifying to hear that older people find resonance with it. It's yes, I'd just like to say thank you.
Okay, so I will go on. I have a few other questions, and I don't know. Let me just say that in this edition, there's a nice little interview of Elizabeth-Irene at the back. It says Q&A with Elizabeth-Irene Baitie. So in structuring my discussion, I've tried to avoid all the questions that appear here because they are very well answered. Is it the same in this edition?
No, it's
too?
not. The
Right.
Ghanaian edition doesn't have those questions. That's in the US edition, but not in the Ghanaian edition.
Oh, all right. They could have made my life easier by just reading the questions and getting answers from you. Okay. But then there's a dog, Choku, the dog who died. And the dog died in a bad way. It was poisoned to death. Now, when you're writing for children, and I would say again about this book, there are a lot of things that are in life, but maybe one would expect that they would frighten children. There's blood. There's a bed. There's a bed that uh, kills someone. There's the dog that dies in the end. I mean, there's stuff that is graphic and bloody. Is did you not think that you are traumatizing the young adults?
I actually did not. My son was the sort of boy whom, if you asked to draw something, you can be sure that there would be there'll be bodies in the trail of the drawing. So I do realize that not all boys, of course, but to a large extent, boys are it's those images are not so strange to boys and even to a lot of girls as well. Now, with regards to the dog, I grew up with dogs. There were very few periods in my life where we didn't have dogs, and dogs have a way of really stealing your heart. And dogs, unfortunately, also have a way of dying and just breaking your heart. And that has happened to me a few times in my life. Not necessarily poison, no, but the death of a dog is always it's very sad. And I think that just because of the relationship that I had with dogs growing up, the children in the story also had a dog, and unfortunately.
Yeah, Chuku. Well, so I think that we will begin to bring the conversation to an end. We can invite questions as well, but when I finish this story, especially because the Ato, I mean, they've always wanted to go to Numa, and we end in anticipation. Immediately, I wondered, is there a sequel? Are you going to write a follow up to this? Will we ever see Ato and his friends?
That's in Flying Up the Mountain.
Oh,
Yes.
really?
So the sequel to this in Flying Up the Mountain, they do get to Noma, and yes, a lot happens on Noma.
Now that you bring us to Flying Up the Mountain, when do you anticipate that we'll have copies? And do we actually have? I know that you said you had a few copies left on you. Are they still left? Are they
No,
available if somebody
unfortunately, they are
wants?
sold out.
Oh,
I had some sent down from the US, but those are sold out. However, the Ghanaian edition will be coming out, I think, towards the end of the year. Before then, I will have some more copies from the UK because it's coming out in the UK next month. So from the UK and the US, I'll have some more copies before the Ghanaian edition comes out.
Okay, so well, that's it's going to be interesting to follow these young characters in Flying Up the Mountain.
Awesome.
Do we have any questions? And if not, we'll take a final reading and then we can call it an evening. Yes, young man. If you could tell us your name, would be happy to know.
Okay, my name is Aslam, Aslam.
Okay, Aslan, like in the
Aslan.
the lion
The Land, the
from
Witch, and the Wardrobe.
yes, yeah. Okay,
Narnia's Chronicles.
okay.
It's Ato's grandmother's name, Nana Sewa, or just Sewa.
Her name is Nana Sewa. And everybody just calls her Nana.
Okay.
But Nana means grandmother. Nana means grandmother. So when she's called Nana, even if her name had been Ya or Grace or Amelie, or he would still have called her Nana because Nana means grandmother.
That's it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Aslan. You also have one?
Yeah.
Okay, and your name is?
Salman.
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 All right, Salman.
This question is on Flying Up the Mountain.
So hang on, Salman. You've read it?
Yeah.
Wow. So ahead of us then. Okay, please go ahead.
The character in Flying Up the Mountain, Ira or Ira, well, I find her similar in a way to Ato's grandmother because she was able to differentiate or understand and differentiate and tell between their differences in Ato's group. Yeah. So I'm asking, what inspired you in making such a character that will also help them when Ato was in Noma?
So Era, that's a good question. Thank you. Era was a woman of love, and when you're a person who is driven by love, you can tell that even for her, the love that she had for the island, the love that she had for the birds and the animals, and the love that she had for the children in particular, because as far as she was concerned, children were the hope. Children are the hope of the world. We hope that the children will love the world enough to want to do whatever they can to protect it. And that love that she had made her very interested in the children. And she had spent a lot of time, because before Noma had been closed, she had spent a lot of time with children and had learned the different characters. She knew what they were thinking. And all of that was because she sort of opened up herself to them so that she could understand them. And I think there are people who are gifted like that, people who are very insightful, they're very intuitive, they can just quietly observe you and tell you what you are like. And that's what she was. Like, she's a very wise woman because she spent time really knowing other people, not talking too much to people, but also letting people reveal themselves to her. Yes, sir.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. My name is Alpha. Even though there is in the book there is a stream, and you had to cross the stream to get to the other side of the quarters, but somehow metaphorically as I read the book and all the other things that you talked about, it begs the question, what are the streams that we're also crossing in our lives? Because it seems like you have to cross a stream at some point, and I thought that was beautiful. The choice of the title for the book, the things you talked about, but even the deeper meaning of crossing the stream.
Thank
So
you.
thank you for that book.
Thank you very much as well. Yes, there were several layers of thought when I thought about writing this stream, this divide that we have, and I am grateful to hear that it resonated with you, because that's what I had hoped would happen. Thank you.
I mean, taken together, crossing the stream, climbing the, flying up the mountain. I mean, these are like people's mountain challenges in a
Yes.
way. So I'm looking forward to reading the flying up the mountain. The young men have taken the lead on
Beating you
that,
to it.
unfortunately, but it will be available, as Elizabeth-Irene has mentioned, later in the year. Now, I would like us to take just one more short reading, and then we can bring the evening's discussion to a close.
By this time, Atul was going to spend probably about the third or fourth weekend with his grandmother. The pain had started on Thursday, and by the time Atul woke up on Friday morning, it hurt to move his neck. Still, he packed his bag for Nana's and dumped it onto the back seat of Mum's car. Somehow, he made it through school. By the time his mum picked him up after classes, the sun had been quarantined between dark, heavy clouds. It hurt to speak. Atul longed to play his falcon game and saw away from Mum's warnings. He couldn't. The waves of pain from his neck to his head made imagining too difficult. So he stayed slumped in the front seat and dully replied, "Yes, Mum," to everything, keeping his eyes on her scratched dashboard. At Tamarind Ridge, Nana was waiting outside her gate. As soon as his mother had driven off, she cupped her hands around his face. "Atu, you're hot. Where does it hurt?" He brushed his hand across his forehead and his neck, here and here. It felt like a big hard soccer ball was being pumped up in his head. Large drops of rain began to slap at his skin. Nana grasped his limp wrist, led him indoors, and bundled him into bed. The peregrine falcon on the ceiling circled slowly. Was it circling in his head? Was it circling his head? It was hard to tell. He slept and woke again. He was freezing, then burning up, then shivering, and through it all, the soccer ball in his head kept inflating. Nana hovered around like a great formless shadow. "She's got you now. You're trapped. Run, Ato." He was hallucinating, he knew, but he couldn't help the thoughts in his fevered brain. He couldn't control the pathetic way his limbs shuddered. The front door opened, then shut. She had left him alone with his terrifying imaginings. The rain pounded a steady rhythm on the roof. Outside his window, the wind whooshed through branches with the force of a river. A flood was approaching, like the night his dad was born. But instead of being born, he was going to die. He had to be careful, very careful. He had been warned. Nana would push him into the rushing water to sacrifice him. He would be washed into the forbidden stream, and he would drown there along with the sheep, and his grave was waiting. The front door opened again, and the roar of storm winds crashed through the house for a moment, then was abruptly cut off. The door had been shut. Nana was rubbing his shoulders to wake him. His mouth was full of bitter sawdust. He wanted to keep lying down, to close his eyes, but she wouldn't let him. She was propping him up on a footstool, and steam was rising into his face. A pool of dark water formed before him, with floating leaves and branches. She was bending him over, pushing his head down. She wanted to force him in, to drown him. He struggled, trying to fight her off, but her hands were too strong, her dark honey hands that could handle any problem, including a boy who didn't want to die. He whimpered, losing hope, as she draped something soft and heavy over his head. Everything went black. It was hot. She was going to cook him. Steam filled his nostrils, his lungs. He struggled against her, but those strong hands would not let him go. A faint hint of bitterness hit the back of his throat, his tongue. Shh. She wanted him to stop fighting. She murmured something about Neem. Neem, her potion. Be careful of her potions, he had been warned. An ingredient for a potion. That's what she needed him for. He writhed beneath the dark covering, but she was holding him down. Breathe in, Ato, she coaxed softly. He bucked feebly, trying to throw off the heavy cloth. Shh. And she was stroking his shoulders. Her whisper sounded like the rustle of breeze through leaves. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. There was no fight left in him, so he breathed in and out and in. His pajamas were clinging to him. Gentle hands replaced them with dry ones. A warm hand caressed his forehead, and he was a falcon gliding over the dark water, rising, soaring up into the midnight sky.
Thank you very much. So I have one or two more questions. There was a short story with the character Atu in it, which is concealed somewhere in a drawer. Is it going to ever come to see the light?
It will see the light, but the character's name will no longer be Atu, so somebody else has taken that name.
Yeah, I was a bit curious about whether you wrote in any other genre apart from young adult. In fact, I think all the books of yours that I've come across are young adult fiction.
Children, yes, children and
again,
young
right?
adults.
Yeah. Do you do any other genre?
I
Horror,
have
maybe.
I have ideas, but between the laboratory and trying to get out the stories, and I have so many stories circling in my head, just waiting to come out. I think it may be a little while before the adult stories come out.
Right. Okay, so I would like us to bring the conversation to a close now. And first, I would say thank you to the audience, those who joined us on Zoom, on IG, those who were able to connect with us on YouTube, and of course, those of you who are here with us tonight. Thank you very, very much. And of course, to our guest, our author of the month, Elizabeth-Irene Baitie. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night,
Thank you
everybody.
very much.